Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this hybrid meeting of Angus Council. I would remind all attendees that this meeting is being recorded and webcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. I have agreed the attendance of some members remotely and would remind all remote attendees to mute their microphones when not speaking. I would like to remind members that they are allowed one question and one comment. And so to the agenda. Do we have apologies for absence, please?
Yes, Deputy Provost. We've got apologies from the Provost and Councillor Fairweather. Today we've got Councillors Beattie, Gall, Proctor and Stewart. They've joined the meeting remotely and all the other members are in the chamber.
Thank you. And item 2, do we have any declarations of interest and or statements of transparency? And I can...
Yep, thank you. I'd like to declare an interest in agenda item number 8. I'm a trustee of the Courthouse Group, so I'll remove myself from the meeting during that agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Speed. Anybody else? No. Can we go on to item 3, please? The minutes of the Council and committees. The minute 7 for approval. Is this approved? And then I'll go on to B through to I, the minute of the committees. Are they noted? Thank you. Now, item 4 is the Carnoustie Golf Links Management Committee. And we are asked if there are any nominations because our officer has intimated the resignation as a director of CGL-MC with effect from August 23, I beg your pardon. Now, the Council is asked to fill this vacancy, and I just wonder if there are any nominations. No, doesn't look like there are any nominations. And I'll just take advice from our legal person.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. In that case, we'll just simply not appoint to the vacancy. There is already one vacancy in existence, so we'll have 2 vacancies and 1 person in post in terms of CGL-MC. Thank you.
Thank you. And item 5. Angus Council Annual Accounts 2020-2022-23 and Annual Audit Report to members. And I see Mr. Lorimer.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Good afternoon, members. This report was considered and scrutinised actually by the meeting of Scrutiny and Audit Committee last week. It's the culmination of many months' work and a whole year of activity by the Council. It covers our governance, our financial management, best value performance, all of those different things, including the Council's formal accounting statements. It is a significant report in terms of public accountability for the Council's stewardship of public funds and their achievement of best value. It's a legislative requirement to bring it to full Council, even though it's been scrutinised by Scrutiny and Audit Committee. There were a number of adjustments to the draft accounts that were submitted for audit, not least of which was the revised position on the balance sheet treatment of pension assets and liabilities. However, I can advise now that the accounts are complete. They've been signed off by both ourselves as Council and the external auditor. There are no qualifications on those accounts for either the Council nor the 2 Council-run charities mentioned in the report. Now, in relation to the auditor's report, that's Appendix B of the report. There's a number of key messages within that. It's pleasing to see so many positive comments in those messages about the Council's best value arrangements, our financial management, our vision, our leadership, our governance. The key messages also, as you would probably expect, highlight some areas for improvement and, of course, includes within that the challenges around our financial sustainability, which we know all about only too well. There are 5 recommended actions arising from this year's audit, and the report outlines the planned actions in relation to those. So, in summary, there's a lot to absorb there. As I say, overall, I think the report is a positive report. Relatively small number of areas identified for improvement. And that was all I wanted to say by way of introduction. Deputy Provost, happy to take questions if there are any.
Okay, colleagues, any questions? And I see Councillor Duff.
Thanks Deputy Provost, and I'd like to thank Mr Lorimer and all his staff for all the work that's gone into preparing the accounts. We all know how much time it takes, and I think it is a very good report. I just wanted to just raise the issue of the pension situation, which Mr Lorimer mentioned. I mean, there was quite a bit of excitement in the pension community, if I can call it that, when there might potentially have been a surplus in the Tayside Pension Fund. And the draft accounts did show a significant surplus. Now we're showing a slight deficit, but it's a better position than the year before. The deficit is less. Just to get a little, so members understand what has changed. And I mean, clearly there was an opinion earlier in the year which hasn't transpired, and I guess perhaps any potential changes that the pension fund could have made probably were based on the interim results, and clearly now that the final picture is better than last year, but it's not significantly different. Just a wee bit of explanation for that change and what exactly happened would be helpful.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Provost.
Certainly.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Duff. The pensions accounting is probably one of the most technical parts of the accounting, and I don't think in my 17 or however many years I've been signing off the Council's accounts we've ever seen quite such a movement from the draft stage of the accounts to the final stage. So the pensions entries on the balance sheet look at it's a snapshot position at the balance sheet date, and there's a process that the actuaries use to measure both the liabilities on the pension fund and also the assets that are held. Now, as it sets out in the report, the actuary, which was the actuary for the Tayside Fund, provided an assessment based on their interpretation of the accounting standards for the purposes of our draft accounts, and that's what we used, and Dundee City Council, Tayside Contracts, etc., used the same basis of measurement of those pension assets and liabilities. However, that, upon review, was found to be out of step with how most of the rest of Scotland and other actuaries had interpreted that. It is one of those areas that is technical, complex, open to interpretation, but the Tayside position, and therefore the Angus position, was very far out of step with where most other pension funds were in terms of their balance sheet position. So after lengthy discussion, both locally and nationally with Audit Scotland, a revised basis of measurement, still appropriate in terms of the technical standards, was used. And I suppose where we've ended up is a more prudent view of what the position is. So that's the balance sheet accounting position. We are still waiting, I think it's fairly imminent now, for a revaluation on the pension fund. Now that revaluation is done every 3 years, and that will then inform whether what the employer contribution rate will be for the next 3-year period. And the way of measuring the valuation for that purpose is slightly different than what is used for the purposes of the balance sheet. So the two are sort of measuring similar things, but they do take a different view. And that's essentially what's happened in relation to the change between the draft accounts and the audited accounts.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duff, and I believe we've got Councillor Stewart next.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I was just looking at 5.2 of this report, and it says obviously the council continues to face a significant financial challenge, a projected funding gap of 51.9 million, which I think most of us are well aware of that. I just wonder, you know, given the recent devastation in Brechin and Montrose, how are we going to be able to fund that, and how important is it that the Scottish Government actually gives us some assistance? You know, this is obviously something that we're not going to be able to afford on our own.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Stewart, and it probably plays into the next agenda item as well. I think it's fair to say we're still in the process of assessing the impact and the likely cost of the repairs, and of course discussions are also ongoing with government about support mechanisms around that. We will have to look at that both in terms of the impact in the current year. Situations like what we have is why we carry financial contingencies both in our revenue budget and in our capital budget. So you know, those are there for situations such as this. But we will need to fully assess that and think about as we go into the 24-25 budgets preparation, what allowances do we need to make for the extensive repairs and other work that we know will be required. So there's an immediate need of which we can cover through contingencies, but there will also be a need to think about it in terms of the longer term impact as part of the budget setting for next year. Well, and beyond that, actually. Thank you.
Okay, any other hands? No? I beg your pardon, I'll get used to this yet. Item 6, before I go into that, I just want to say a couple of things. Oh! On 5. They'll maybe not let me back if I don't get this right. Right, okay. The recommendations are that there's a recommendation to review the content of the Audit Scotland's annual audit report, covering letter and annual audit report to members attached at appendices A and B. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Now I'll try to go on to item 6. Before I do, I'd like to say the following. I think it's important that we say the storm, this latest one that we're fighting, has hit Brechin in particular, but across Angus. I want to commend all our officers, the emergency services, and in particular the communities involved. The sadness that this is palpable. The tragedy that is the loss of life. And that's the saddest part of all. But the kindness that also comes out of these things has to be mentioned. The innate kindness of people, the amazing community spirit. We will get through this. Thank you, colleagues. And on to item 6, Storm Babette delegation. And I think Mr. Lorimer again.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Provost. I refer to what I was just saying there to Councillor Stewart in relation to the last item. We know that the cost of recovery and repair following the storm is going to be significant. As I said, we're still assessing the full financial implications of that. This report is really about giving us some additional flexibility to deal with the immediate, and that might range from a whole different set of things. So the ask really is to provide an agreement to a sum of money, an initial sum of money, and it is very much an initial sum of money. It will not be enough by any stretch of the imagination, but it will help in terms of the immediate needs and provide much needed flexibility to address those. So that's what the purpose of the report is, and seeking a delegation to the Chief Executive in consultation with myself to use those funds for that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Lorimer. The first hand up was actually Councillor Vaughan and then Councillor Beth Whitside.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just first say I would like to echo exactly what you've said there. I would like to give praise to all the council officers, power of work that they did alongside the emergency services and, of course, the volunteers, specifically in Brechin and other places affected. I'd also like to just give another praise specifically to Jackie Semple for being the face of Angus Council, along with Councillor Gavin Nicholl, over the weekend and into Monday. Gavin accompanied a delegation of Brechiners to Scottish Parliament yesterday, who were there hoping for more details to help coming to Angus, but were left a little bit disappointed with, I think, what they heard down in Parliament. We just need to ensure that the Scottish Government, and I'm sure they are campaigning to ensure that our communities are serviced, are funded, and ensure that we can get them back into their houses or into accommodation as soon as possible. But my question, sorry to go on a little bit there, is 250,000. I know it's not adequate, you've said that, but should we not be asking for more now so we don't have to come to another special committee in 3 weeks' time when this money runs out? Is this going to be adequate to get you through to the next council meeting? Are you going to be looking for more in December? I'm just a bit worried that, 250,000 can get spent in a day or two, especially with the devastation that we've seen in these areas, and I'm kind of concerned that we're maybe just a bit light in what you're asking for. I know it's additional money, and you've already said it's not enough, but should we not be really looking at more today?
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Vaughan. Possibly, but I think I would want to. 250,000 is still a significant sum of money. Effectively, we're asking for council to delegate to officers how that should be spent. We will need to come back. I think we might be coming back fairly soon to outline what we think is a provisional estimate of the whole cost. And as part of that, we would need to set out how we would fund that and what the implications of that would be. So this is very much, as I said, an initial allocation, but I don't think it will be too long. And it may be that we do need a special meeting for council to consider once we have that wider assessment of the implications and how we would propose to fund those. In some respects, today's report was about providing a start in the fact that the council meeting happened to be this week.
Yes.
Yeah, just very quickly, and thanks very much for the answer. I remember the leader of the council mentioning 10 million would be made available previous to that. Is that, where's that coming from, and where's that in the report, or is that?
If I could bring in Councillor Whiteside.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, we made a commitment last week, obviously, that the recovery was going to be our #1 priority. That remains the case. And Mr Lorimer has mentioned contingency funds, which we know are available should we require them, and that has not changed at all. This paper is specifically around permission to release an initial 250,000 from the uncommitted general fund for costs associated with an initial response, and to delegate decision making. I mean, regardless of any commitment we make, we still have a duty for scrutiny and transparency, and to be aware and give permission of where the funds are coming from as they're required. But also the paper says that we're adding a further 250,000 from the provision for additional burdens, so that's a total of £500,000 in the very initial stages. And I can't stress enough, this is very much an initial sum to help the council respond to the immediate aftermath, and not the total sum of the council's support. We've also got a duty to get best value, and in that regard we're working with a number of other financial support streams sourced from other council, community and private funds, which will help support the immediate needs and take us into the medium term as those flooded out are moved into longer term housing. Obviously we need to find out exactly what the costs are going to be, and until that's clear we won't know exactly what the support is. But we've had a commitment from the Scottish Government for support, and I can reassure members that they've actually been in touch with the council today to continue discussions around how that's going to look. If anyone in Angus, as an individual or a business, including agricultural businesses, needs immediate support as a direct result, please contact the council either by calling the access line, dropping into the Crickety in Brechin, or visiting the Angus Council website and following the link to flood recovery, where you can fill out an online form. I'd like the public and members to know that we're rapidly developing processes to help us create robust funding options which can support both council and private tenants and private households, as well as businesses, large and small, who are directly impacted by the flooding. The discussions are being expanded to include community funds to support them to also have robust criteria and processes in place. As we work to ensure that the immediate needs are met, we're also preparing for medium-term support as families and businesses move to longer-term, if not yet permanent accommodation, with needs which are not yet clear. However, we are confident that those needs can be met. It's also appropriate to remind members that the Bellwyn scheme, the Government's Emergency Financial Assistance Fund, is only open to local authorities and therefore not something we can offer to others. However, given damage to our infrastructure, we'll certainly need this fund to support our recovery as well. Sadly, there are no blank cheques, and we've spoken often of the challenging financial situation the Council's already in. But by working together and with the commitment of support in the medium and longer term from Scottish Government, I'm confident that Angus will quickly recover and continue to move forward into a prosperous future. And there is a list of funds available in the immediate term for flood relief, council reserves, provision for additional burdens, as we've already heard today. There's welfare rights crisis grants, there's care grant, lease or discretionary funds. In terms of community funds, there's a Rotary Club fund, GoFundMe. In the private sector, there are supermarket food donations, anonymous donations, and philanthropic humanitarian fund. In terms of business, there's the NFU fund for farming businesses, and we've mentioned the government funding through the Bellwyn scheme. So I hope that reassures everyone that we are fully committed and we are regarding this as our #1 priority. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteside. And I have Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Gregg, then Councillor... I've forgotten your name for a minute. Scott. Jill Scott, of course. So sorry. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Oh, I'm hearing myself echo there. Oh no, that's okay. While I welcome these additional funds, you know, I think I tend to agree with Councillor Wan that they're quite shallow. I mean, I think £250,000 probably wouldn't even be enough to look at the devastation at Montrose seafront, never mind what's happened, the situation in Brecon, which is equally as bad. And I just feel, you know, the leader's answer is lacking in depth there. It's not really answered any questions for the poor tenants through in Brecon. You know, we're now 2 weeks down the line and the tenants are still waiting on answers. I've even got tenants contacted me who are in Montrose and they've heard nothing. They've been decanted through to Montrose and they're not getting answers either. So it's a bit of a shame that we're 2 weeks down the line. That's not happened. Anything appears to be happening for them yet.
If I can just halt everybody else coming in for a minute, I'd like to refer to the Chief Exec for a minute. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. I just really want to point out about the recommendations, because what you're doing here is you're turning over a sum of money to myself and Ian Lorimer to decide what to do with. And you know, it doesn't matter what that sum of money is, you're trusting us to do what we think is appropriate with that money. The bigger the sum of money that is, the less democratic involvement you have. So I think as a good start with the 0.25 and allowing us to use that as an immediate response is really what's been asked for here, as opposed to the quantity.
Thank you, Ms Williamson. I'd like to call on Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think everyone's quite upset with the devastation that's been caused, particularly in Brecon, Montrose, other parts of Carnoustie that they now have their issues, as well as Finneven and Tannadice. This is fundamentally a small amount of money to begin with, and I think we all appreciate how a huge amount of money is going to be required to make right quite a lot of the devastating impact of the storm. Can I ask Mr. Lorimer if he has sort of an idea at the moment, roughly, with the scale of damage that's been done, what a sort of a ballpark kind of figure might be that we might be looking at to make good properties, infrastructure, transport links, and everything else associated with that?
Through you, Deputy Provost. The short answer is no, but that is information we're working very hard to gather and assess, even to get an outline of what it may potentially cost. As I mentioned in my response to Councillor Vaughan, I think we will be bringing details of that back as soon as we possibly can, and as part of that, we would have to have a discussion about, well, what do we think the cost is? How are we going to fund that? Is there additional support available from other sources, and what does that then mean in terms of both the current year's financial position and the position into future years? So, I mean, I get why there's perhaps a bit of frustration that this report only covers 250,000. This is part one, and part two, which I think will be a further report with more detail, asking for more money, will come fairly quickly, I would think.
And can I hear Jill Scott, please?
Whiteside, oh sorry, no, I've done a London, not put my mic on. Taking into consideration what the Chief Executive has said and what Councillor Whiteside has said, to let you know that I've been copied into an email last night from a business that's absolutely desperate. The businesses are desperate for help. They have no contingencies, so if this money could help them in any way, I mean, obviously I've spoken to lots of tenants who are happy, and they're happy that they've been supported. They feel very well supported. They're very grateful for all the help and support that they've had from Council, but the businesses are kind of left in limbo. So if appreciate this money's being handed over to you to make decisions, so if that could be looked at, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. And
thank you, Deputy Provost. A couple of things to think about from the comments here. It's disappointing that Councillor Stewart has met tenants that don't feel like they've been supported. From what Councillor Wan said about Councillor Nicholl being the face of the flooding, he was certainly on the news, but Councillor Scott and Councillor Beattie deserve a lot of credit for the groundwork that they were doing on the days of the flooding, and subsequently down at the Crickety helping people with the issues that they've got. I mentioned back to Councillor Stewart where if people are feeling unsupported and he is aware of them, the Council has given him enough mechanisms to help those people be supported from the Council services. And I'm really disappointed to hear the commentary consistently be that Angus Council hasn't done enough. If we're finding the gaps, we need to be using the resources the Council's put in place to fill those gaps. So if Councillor Stewart knows of people that haven't heard anything, support those people. Support them by feeding in to the emails that we've been given to feed into to help these people out. There's the drop-ins at the Crickety, and I've seen firsthand the difficulties people are in, and have helped a number of folk. And I'm just really disappointed that some of the politicisation of this, because actually what we're all here to do is not sneer at the efforts. Angus Council has done what it can. We've detailed how much money is potentially available. The papers here are very, very clear. If you read your papers, what we're agreeing here is they're not even that long. And yet we're questioning what's in them. It's there. So I'm just really disappointed in the narrative and the tone here of a council senior leadership team that are following the same policies in terms of disaster relief that would have been under the previous administration. So this idea that this is a thing is nonsense. We should be all supporting our constituents to the best we can, trying to get the help and support to the people that have got the biggest issues, support our businesses, like Councillor Scott said, and try and get the Scottish Government to do their sums and get back to us as soon as they can physically get back to us. I would just ask everyone around this chamber to sort of take a look and think about what we can do to help, because it's really disappointing the tone of some of this chat.
second? Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you. Mine's just a point of clarification, and thanks very much to Councillor MacDonald for his rant there. I don't think anybody's really trying to make this political. In fact, it really probably started off being political when two of my colleagues, Montrose councillors, weren't invited down to the Montrose seafront where the devastations happened there with the erosion with the local MSP, I believe Joe Fitzpatrick. They were actually kept out of the meeting. They were never informed that he was even visiting. So, as far as we are concerned, this isn't political. This is about the people of Brecon, the people of Montrose. So rather disappointed in his tone, and we will not sit here and take a lecture from Councillor Mark MacDonald. Doesn't matter what his position in the council is, but that certainly is not why we are here. We are here to help the residents. We are here to scrutinise what's happening, and I am sure that the council are doing everything they can. We're only pointing out maybe some of the shortfalls that has come to Councillor Stewart, and I'm pretty sure he's adult enough and been in the council long enough to know to signpost them to where they need to be. Thank you.
Point of clarity, ministers don't really have the availability to appear at one day's notice. A visit had been arranged. The minister had asked to speak to members of administration around about whatever we thought was appropriate several weeks in advance. As it happened, his visit coincided with the terrible situation in Montrose, and we were there to discuss that amongst other things, including the situation in Brecon. As was common during the last administration, these meetings don't include everybody, but Elaine Whitted did email local members out of courtesy to inform them that the meeting was taking place. So there was nothing untoward, and it certainly wasn't organised at one day's notice.
Councillor Cheap.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Yeah, a wee bit shocked at the tone this afternoon so far. In 7 years of being a councillor on Angus Council, this is the one event that I would suggest that would bring the whole of this council together for the benefit of the communities that are ravaged by the storms, whether that's in Brecon, whether that's in north of Brecon, in Moneyfeith, Montrose, Carnoustie, whatever. We have a collective responsibility and duty to all constituents in this matter. It's not for this chamber to politicise this debate. We're here to help everybody. I think the goodwill and certainly we've heard already the respect and thanks have been provided to Angus Council, council officers and some local members particularly who have helped out here. So I would ask everybody to reflect on that and come together as one council to support everybody involved in this. Thank you.
And before I invite Councillors Duff and Brazen, I'd just like to remind members to keep comments relevant to the report and the recommendations. And from just in addition to that, be careful of tone. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. Yeah, I was at the cricket on Monday of this week, and I'd have to say, I thought the work that the communities team and the housing team were doing was fantastic. They were clearly working under a lot of strain. They've been working through the weekend. They were doing their very best for people who were displaced, and I'm a wee bit disappointed with some of the comments because from what I could see they were doing a first-rate job. I think on some of the comments about the amount of money, we all know there's going to be a huge amount of capital work that's required, and it's completely unrealistic for anyone to think that Mr Lorimer or anyone else can provide exact figures today. It will take quite some time to do the engineering investigations, to develop plans and to get appropriate consultants in to advise. So that I think is going to take quite some time. So I wouldn't be expecting anything like that on week 2.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Braze.
Yes, thanks, Provost. Before this meeting started today, I spoke to Councillor Fotheringham, who is spokesperson, I suppose, for housing, for the Conservatives. And for the non-administration group. And I have a very good working relationship with him. I'm the administration's housing spokesperson, and I've asked for his cooperation and promised him that I'll keep him fully in the loop, because we both appreciate that this goes way beyond anything else we've ever come across, and we have to work together to get this sorted. So I'm entirely confident that my colleague, Councillor Fotheringham, will work with me, and he can certainly be assured that I'll work with him to get through this appalling disaster that has hit particularly Brechin. And to Councillor Stewart, I do understand your frustration that you've come across people that, you know, they've been made homeless by this disaster. But the scale of the disaster means that it was always going to be thus, and we will get these people sorted out as soon as we can, but it will take time and it will take patience. And I think Councillor Gregg was asking for a ballpark figure. Well, I quite understand that Ian can't really offer that, because we're not even at the stage of being able to get into the rivers to assess the amount of damage that there's been caused by this flood, because the rivers are still too wild. So it's going to be some time, I would suggest, before we even have a real ballpark figure to offer. And but once we have the proper figures, everyone will be made aware of them, and then we'll all have to take decisions to move forward, and that's what we'll do, because we are councillors and we're responsible, and we'll do our job. Thanks.
I see no further hands. Just come to the recommendations, colleagues. 1 and 2, are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Then we'll move on to item 7. That's the best value and thematic work in councils, and I believe our Chief Exec would like to speak.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Just to introduce the report very briefly, because the report has already been to scrutiny and audit. Members will be well aware we had a best value audit last year. This is a new way for Audit Scotland to be doing best value, and this report in particular has looked at how well Angus Council's leadership of the new local priorities are progressing. Under item 4, you will see the key messages that are listed, and then under item 5, the improvement actions that we are required to take. I'll leave aside the impressive messages from Audit Scotland at 4 and talk about item 5, which is really about the improvement actions, and you will see that many of them are already underway to being completed. Thanks, Deputy Provost.
Thank you, Ms Williamson, and I'll bring in Councillor Whiteside.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just a very quick word. As our Chief Executive has said, this has already been to Scrutiny and Audit Committee and discussed there. I'd just like to say that I welcome this report. Following on from the excellent Best Value report in 2022, it's a very welcome report, and I would draw attention to the key messages on page 109 in particular. And just thank you to everyone involved in working through the actions. Thanks.
I see no more hands. Could I ask that we look to the recommendation, and can I ask if you agree with it? Thank you very much, colleague. Can we move on now to item 8, the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund? And I believe we've got Ms Patterson. Councillor Speed has just left the room for momentarily.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. As Council will know, this project has been on the cards for a long time. The group at the Courthouse were successful in reaching stage 2 of the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund a couple of years ago, but were unsuccessful at that application, received some really useful feedback from the Scottish Government and invited back to submit an application in future years. This round, the group has again been successful at round 1, and this report seeks authorisation to submit an application to stage 2. As some background for Council, the Vibrant Communities team have been working with the Courthouse Group over the last 2 years. There's been an awful lot of work undertaken to finalise the plan for the building, and experts have been pulled in, such as Business Gateway and the Community Ownership Officer from Development Trusts Association Scotland, who have been working with the group to develop a comprehensive business plan. Officials from Scottish Government who lead on the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund have visited and are impressed with the condition of the building. The group have picked up the feedback from the Scottish Government last time around and have asked that they join up more to the Tay Citysdale plan and progression of the group be looked at. This has been undertaken, the board has been expanded and further expertise has been brought around the table. The group have also undertaken a field visit to Huntly, where significant work has been undertaken by the Huntly community, and they've been working with and mentored by the Huntly Development Trust, who have 4 very successful community ownership projects which are also award-winning. Work has been undertaken as well with other local authorities to look at legal agreements and best practice, and these will be adopted by Angus Council to ensure that we lessen the risk for the project to the Council. Further options are currently being progressed with officers to look at the funding of a property manager to support the group in terms of having some property development experience to take the project forward with the board. This report in front of you today seeks authorisation from Angus Council to act as the lead applicant to submit a Stage 2 application to the Scottish Government Regeneration Capital Grant Fund on behalf of our Arbroath Courthouse Community Trust. If the application at Stage 2 is successful, then a further report will be brought back to Council which sets out the detail of the proposals. Thank you very much, and my colleague Audrey Meaky is available online to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms Patterson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'd just like, first of all, very quickly to say it's fantastic to see this project going forward for this application for grant funding. It's in my ward. It just goes to show that communities can work together, as we've seen with the Montefieth one, if this was to get through the second phase. My question, however, on it though is, if I remember correctly from the cinema in Montrose, and I think it actually mentions it in here, if it does go through the second phase, the council are then effectively guaranteeing, this if something went wrong throughout the project. I know Montrose Cinema was successful, but is that the same situation with this, if I'm reading this correctly?
I'll bring in my colleague Audrey Meaky to bring some more detail on that issue.
Hi, many thanks. And so it is a similar, it's exactly the same fund, so the same legalities are in place. What it actually means is we go almost into partnership with the Scottish Government, and the information between the agreement with Scottish Government and ourselves will be translated into the agreement between ourselves and the courthouse. So a lot of work has been done working with other local authorities to just look at how we can make sure that there's less risk within that process, but it's all been taken into consideration, Councillor Beattie.
Okay, thank you, Audrey, and just once again, great to see this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. Thank you, Audrey. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Dunno.
It's just a comment, really, if you want to take more questions.
Yes, quite happy to do that. There's no difference.
Right. I just welcome this project and I really hope it goes through, and I'd like to thank all the officers for all the work that you've done on this, because there's been an awful lot of projects you've had to work on this year. This building is a beautiful building, and it's sat empty for such a long time, and it was well used at the weekend. My grandchildren were there for the Halloween activities, and it was really good, and I just want to thank all the people that have worked with this, and I just really hope that we manage to get some more money in and we get the project off the ground. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunno. And sorry, I'll start again. I can see no more hands for questions or comments. Can we go to the recommendations? The first one is to note the second is to note, the third is to agree, and the fourth is to note. Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And now I'd like somebody to ask Councillor Speed back. She left the room because of her declaration of interest. Kind of warm in here, is everybody okay? Thank you, Councillor Speed. We go on to item 9, which is the Public Bodies Climate Change Duties Angus Council Annual Report. And I think Jill Patterson again has taken up residence.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. A number of members attended a briefing session this morning, and we will circulate the slides from those that were unable to attend. That provided an overview of current work of the Environment and Climate Change team, including some detail of the content of various reports before you this afternoon. This particular report provides an overview of the Council's compliance with its climate change duties. It includes a detailed technical submission, which is the required data that we need to input to Scottish Government. Unfortunately, as we've outlined in previous years, it's a set format in an Excel spreadsheet, which we've tried repeatedly to ask to be changed, and we have tried to present this as best we can. As outlined in previous years, what we've done is accompany this with a summary report that sets out the detail that is in that technical appendix. The report also provides an update on the progress made in relation to the Council's measures to improve performance relating to sustainability and climate change. Agreement is sought on the content of the report for submission to Scottish Government as part of our annual return. Thank you.
Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. And thanks for this report, I think. I mean, really, it is a very difficult report to read, and it takes a huge amount of work to get it together. So I do hope that changes can take place and you don't have to do that. I'd also like to thank you very much for the briefing this morning, which was very helpful. But my question is on page 157, it's 4E, and I'm just so pleased to see that the second South Esk Catchment Management Plan is being progressed. It's now vital that work is undertaken upriver from Brechin after the recent events. Is there any timeline for taking this forward, or at least starting on it?
I'm actually going to bring in my colleague Kellyanne Dempsey just to provide a little bit of detail. She's been working on the River South Esk Catchment Management Plan.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. Sorry. In answer to that, just prior to COVID, we did carry out a full public consultation. We attended events locally. It was online. We had all our information pulled together to start to write that, and then the pandemic struck, so we've had to take a step back, and we will have to do another public consultation. We do have an outline of the strategy and actions that we want to propose as a partnership. We're also waiting for the biodiversity strategy to be published later this year by the Scottish Government after the consultation closes. We are working with neighbouring catchment initiatives. So next week I'm at a session up on D-side for the D-catchment partnerships launch. So we have coordinated the launch of the D, the Spey, and hopefully the South Esks with the National Park, because we all have headwaters in the park. So in an answer, in the next, hopefully, 6 to 9 months, we should have a plan in place. We do have a catchment partnership meeting tomorrow, and that is a running agenda item currently. So we know what we want to include, and it's just having a public consultation finalised. So in the new year, I'll have more detail on that.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm always impressed when somebody sits there and speaks without a note. Well done. Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just a follow-up to that, Kellyanne. I'm just wondering if what was contained in that original plan will be enough of adaptations to accommodate the escalating issues in that area? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I think this plan will be quite different. That initial plan was written, consultation was 2008, so it was quite a long time ago. Things have changed quite dramatically. I think the scale of landscape scale changed, the opportunities for work and funding has changed, and priorities in land management have changed. Probably our economic and community focus has changed as well. So there'll be very similar themes, but quite a different plan. I think it might be more, it was quite strategic. I think this one could be more of a locality-based action plan as well.
Oh, we've got Councillor Proctor with his hand up. Councillor Proctor.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Comment, if I may. I've no more questions.
Councillor Proctor.
Thank you very much. I thought the presentation this morning was absolutely first class, very informative and very interesting. And I'd just like to commend Kellyanne there for putting a sort of frame, a time frame on how the change is going to come about to what's been proposed previously due to the flooding, because we've heard today certainly about breaking and my throws, but in the interior of Angus, certainly in my ward, I've seen quite a lot of damage, flooding up in Rottle, out towards Kingoldrum, feed waters into the obviously into Montrose Basin, but also into the River Isla, which in fact goes into the Tay. And it's actually rewarding to know that this has been acknowledged and being looked at. And you know, I do hope that there's good cooperation between landowners, the council, and all other agencies to get this sorted out in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Proctor. I don't see any more hands. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Provost. It was in relation to 4.10 and the LED lighting upgrades that have been made. I noticed Forfar Community Campus had an upgrade, so I just wondered what the kind of lifetime cycle was of the LED lighting. And also something that kind of struck a bit of a chord with me was with regards to the upgrades in sheltered housing. Often on my travels as older people's champion, that's something that older people mention is around the impact of poor lighting or lighting in some of the sheltered housings that has been needed upgraded. I just wondered if there was a little bit more detail on perhaps kind of the longer term scale of those projects and what other places will be next.
Ms Patterson.
I can't give you a specific time frame on the life cycle of the LED lighting, but I'll check with colleagues in property assets and come back to you on that. In terms of the LED lighting programme, property assets team do have a programme of works for LED lighting across the estate, the property estate. That's reliant on funding to implement that LED lighting. So we have programme of works. Some of that has been pulled together and put forward as an early submission to the one-off climate change funding that's available, which we're due to bring a report back on early in the new year. Part of that has also been impacted on by the available resource within the property assets team. There has been some struggles with recruitment, so that programme of work is reliant on the design work being undertaken for some of these measures. But there is certainly a programme across the school estate and across the housing estate for that to come into place.
Thank you.
No more hands. Can I move to... You're ahead of me. Good. Well done. I like to see that. Now we go on to item 10, the Angus Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan Progress Report. And again, I think we've got Ms Patterson.
Just before Jill comes in, Councillor Proctor, could you put your mic off in case there's any echo?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. In September 2019, the Council declared a climate emergency which recognised the impact of climate change on communities within Angus happening now and in the future. In response to the evolving climate emergency, the Council published a Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan in October 2021, otherwise known as the CCAP. That outlined a variety of actions across sectors and involved stakeholders and partners from across the region in its development. The CCAP complements the Council's own activity, but without the input of business and community, making real progress with climate change and addressing targets remains challenging. The CCAP therefore looks to develop this activity. We had some delay, but a coordinator for the CCAP was appointed in January of this year, and that has allowed work to progress on reviewing and monitoring progress with the CCAP, and an update from the project officer was provided earlier today. This report provides an update on the progress with the CCAP and its implementation, and seeks agreement to circulate to members of the steering group who will be involved in preparing the second phase delivery programme next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Patterson, and I'd like to ask Councillor Devine to speak.
Very quick question. Jill, I was wondering if there has been any interest in fulfilling the role of the chair of CCAP, because I would see this as needed to drive this forward. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we've been struggling with fulfilling the role of Chair, Councillor Devine. I would hope, I don't like to sort of play on a significant event, but I'm hoping that that might generate some interest across the community, and particularly the business community, in actually picking up the mantle and leading on that chair role. So it will, I think, let things die down over the next few weeks and pick that up in terms of our discussion with business, and particularly from the economic development side of my service, is to drive that forward, because there's some key business voices out there who I think would take on a great role as chair.
Thank you. It's really important that we focus on this area of work, but I just wanted to pick up on something right at the end of the document on page 190, relating to curbside collection services, and I know that's in discussion at the minute, but it also notes within this document that the deposit return scheme has been postponed until March 2024, but I believe that is now a later date than that, and we're approving this information in the report. So I just wanted to make sure that that is updated with the current. And I know that this discussion is live at the minute, and it's also another reason why it's so important, because it needs to feed into all of the recommendations and work we're doing towards climate change.
Thank you, Councillor Doran. I'll just check with my legal colleagues whether that needs to be a formal amendment, or we can agree to pick that up in terms of a change to the timescale.
Yourself, Vice Provost, I was just going to say that in terms of that, we could simply note that date will be amended in terms of the report. As you say, it's a live discussion, so we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Buchanan, and I'd like to bring in Councillor Shepherd.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'll just read from page 188 of the report. Plans. My mouse has jumped away from it. Plans for an EV charging hub in Arbroath have been shelved at the moment as the proposed funding stream is no longer available. Other funding opportunities are being explored. I just wondered if we could have some detail on if they think that might come back in the future, because it's one I think where a charging hub would be great in Arbroath, like you have them in Dundee, and it's something that could pay for itself perhaps over some time. And I think the Arbroath Golf Links have had some success in securing some chargers lately commercially. So I just thought I wanted to mention that, so that to see where the direction of travel is over the longer term on that one. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Shepherd. Yeah, it's absolutely still on the table. It's, as with most funding, it's matching up the available resource to design these schemes and prepare funding bids, because most of those sit within competitive funds, particularly for the scale of some of the EV charging hubs. We have supported Arbroath Golf Links with with the work that they've been undertaking with a small number of chargers. So it is still there, and as officers highlighted this morning, it's actually some of this work is starting to get those projects to a kind of funding ready proposal, but it is relying on the support from internal council resource to develop and design those.
Thanks for that.
Okay, folks, can we move on to the... I've actually got Councillor Gregg.
Sorry, Deputy Provost, thank you. Just one more question. From page 189, to do with coastal erosion, project number 10 is assess the Montrose coastal erosion projection options for implementation. Excuse me. I've previously stated at a meeting when we discussed the coastal erosion at Montrose that this is something that's been talked about for years and years and years, and really needs to be something done sooner rather than later before Montrose no longer ceases to be there. And I think the effects of Storm Babbitt have sort of highlighted that quite abundantly with the state of things there, and that parts of the dunes are just disappearing literally before our eyes. And it mentions here in project number 10 about the risk to opening of flood corridors throughout the dunes. So given that obviously the emergency that we've had, the work that's going to be done as we go into the recovery phase of that, as well as with the information as this report, are we likely to be able to give Montrose a bit of a priority within this lead with regards to protecting their dunes and re-enhancing that, and protecting Montrose as a whole before these dunes completely disintegrate and more Montrose is lost?
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. What would say these reports, both the CCAP report and the forthcoming report, which is next on the agenda, which is around our transition to net zero action plan, are a coordination of all the activity from all the different services across the council. So these documents really much bring that together. They set out what has been happening in terms of progress and what initiatives are underway, and also start to take that forward look. So they are at a point in time, and I suspect given the recent weather events, etc., that these will change quite rapidly in terms of what those actions are going forward, and we'll work with the capital projects team, who are the lead on that particular work area, to get the most recent update for the next iteration. But it is that kind of pool together of all the different services. So what I would say is capital projects will be the conduit for that, and provide a more detailed update in due course once that assessment work has been undertaken.
Thank you, Ms Patterson. Can we move to recommendations, please? To note and to agree and to note. Is that agreed? Item 11, which is the Angus Council transition to net zero. And guess who? We've got Jill Patterson next to me. Over to you, Jill.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm conscious that we have covered the theme of climate change quite a bit in Council today, and this is the last of the three reports. It provides the first annual update to Council on the implementation of the transition to net zero action plan, which was agreed by Council in September last year. So that sets out what activity across the Council is underway, and those actions to ensure that we meet our interim target at 2030. The report details the progress we made on our emissions reduction and our targets, and it also highlights some of the achievements, progress, but also the challenges ahead. Quite often, in terms of the addressing targets, the first few years are more straightforward, and as we get closer to the targets, it is more challenging actions. As I outlined this morning, the climate change is recognised both within the Council plan and a corporate risk register. So we do provide a twice yearly update to scrutiny and audit as part of the corporate climate change risk. And there will be the challenges that are outlined in the report will be reflected in those as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Patterson. And can I ask Councillor Bell?
Thank you. Thanks for the report, Jill. I just want to pick up a couple of things on page 206, please. The PV systems around Brecon Community Campus and Webster High School. Obviously, it says they're partially completed due to contractor insolvency. The works are due to commence soon. I just felt that ongoing to 2030 was quite a long time scale. I wondered if that was just maybe had been missed, or that the completion might be earlier than that. And likewise, you probably covered the LED street lighting around the finances, but I did feel that the ongoing to 2030 was again quite a long period of time to finish the 3% street lights, and wondered if we could pull that in. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. What we can do is liaise with our property assets team and just get a revised timescale and detailed programme for those, and make sure that those are reflected in the unupdated report.
Councillor Dunn.
Thank you. I just had a question about the internal audit and if there was any kind of date for that mentioned. It's on page 202 and it's in red in saying to be arranged. I'm also just very conscious, I've been through this list. I know that the staffing challenges relating to some of the actions taking place, but also a consideration that maybe there should be more conversation amongst us as councillors about how we can support this plan as well through our own actions, because it impacts on everything we do. But my question was relating to that internal audit, and if you had any update on that at all.
Hi there. That's one of my actions to take forward. So yeah, I'm planning on speaking to internal audit shortly to getting a date in the new year to sit down and see what we do. So we've not done one before, so it's quite a new topic to take forward at the moment.
Yes,
it
here's
is.
the question.
It is, might as well, yeah.
Right, I'll take these two and then come to comments.
Okay.
Sorry, is that another question? So, right, I've got Councillors Devine, Cheap and Dunno for questions.
Right.
Anybody else?
Glad to see there's going to be a mandatory climate change e-learning package for staff, but I think actually what Councillor Dorn was saying there, it would be really helpful if we had one for councillors as well. I think we all need to have a clearer idea of what is required in our own lives, but also within the council. That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's something that we can definitely look into. We've done some work for the staff package already, so I'm sure we can do some tweaks to make it sort of more relevant to the councillors.
Councillor Cheap.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I do have a question at the very end of this. I'll make a very brief comment on it. I mean, this report I found this report very, very easy to read and easy to understand. So I congratulate them on that. And it was encouraging to read that of our successes so far with all of this. And I believe we should go into this positively. We state in the report that we define an average of 5.8% reduction in each of the remaining years here. Bearing in mind, over the last year to this year, we actually reduced by 11.4%, so I think we should be moving positively forward in that knowledge. On that basis, my question really was, in more of a summary, what large-scale projects could actually affect that change most of all to be able to achieve a minimum of 5.8% per year in the remaining years of this project?
So the decarbonisation of heat is the biggest emission source from the council. So yeah, large-scale projects around sort of the council's buildings and obviously decarbonising heating source, that would probably achieve the biggest hit.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dunno.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. Mine's is a bit of a plea and a question, really. a lot of recycling charities in Angus worked really well with the Angus Council, and I'm just wondering, as a plea, they've had letters through this week saying that they are now going to be charged for using our recycle centres, and I just wonder if we could have a further discussion about this, because obviously they are saving us a lot of money and doing recycling for us, and I don't really think they should be penalised because of charities for doing that. So if that's maybe a conversation I could have with somebody at some point about that, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm sure that can be done. Can it? Yeah.
Thank you. It was on page 209, and it was just provide some detail, please, if you could, with regards to why the addition of the electric bikes to the corporate vehicle fleet had been scrapped.
Yeah, from speaking to the group, the fleet group, I think they decided that they weren't sure how often the bikes would be used, and I think they just thought the cost of an electric bike versus who would use them, it wasn't quite stacking up. So I think that's why that decision was came to.
Thank you. Provide a follow-up comment. My only concern with that would be around how then, as a council, we're kind of being those kind of drivers and leaders of, you know, those changes that we're asking the public to consider. But I appreciate if it isn't going to be cost effective, then it's perhaps not for this time.
Yeah, I'll take it back to the next group meeting and bring that up with them.
Happy with that? Comment from Councillor Melville.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. I want to touch on an item on page 11, and that's 205 of the combined papers, where the action is deliver Montefiore Learning Campus to achieve Passive House Design Standard. I'm incredibly pleased to see this. It's exactly the kind of climate ambition that we need to see in current and future capital projects. Something else, obviously, that the Montefiore Learning Campus will have is a solar array and air source heat pumps included as well. So we absolutely need to be putting climate change at the heart of everything that we're doing, and this project's a key example of that. So I want to, again, congratulate officers for managing to pull that off.
Okay. We've got Councillor Ian Gall. Ian.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. It was just a quick comment. Obviously, we saw the haunting images of what happened with the storm, and prevention schemes being breached and what's happened at Montrose. But it was also to say that there are several areas that I've visited recently on farms where there's been major breaching of banks on their land. Hundreds of acres have been flooded. That's happening now, and they have huge costs that they're having to implement. So this has been felt by communities. It's maybe not quite as visible as we saw in the news, etc. And I just wanted to highlight the impact that there is being felt hugely, and it comes at a huge cost that we urgently need to try and help and tackle them with, because they know there's help there, but they do feel that time is against them, and they're dipping into their own pocket now, and it's huge. We can see how aggressive this is hitting people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gall. And Councillor Devine.
Just a very quick comment. No, a comment, yes. It's on page 202 where we're saying going to work closely with community resilience groups. Now, there are some superb community resilience groups, but they tend to be in the rural areas. And I hope that we can maybe add on to that, that there will be encouraging new groups in towns, particularly because we would probably need a few in different towns, but not to forget the towns.
Okay, I see no more hands. Then can we turn to the recommendations, please, of which there are two, both to be noted. Item 12, the Business Gateway Tayside change of role of elected member to the Business Gateway Board. Where I think Jill and maybe Mark Davidson, but it's Jill. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Members will recall at the meeting on 11th of May 2023, the Council agreed the appointment of Councillor MacDonald to the Business Gateway Tayside Board in an observer capacity as defined with the policy on appointment of elected members to outside bodies. At the recent Business Gateway Board meeting, the lead project officer from Dundee City Council led the elected members through the roles and responsibilities and purpose of the board. Following this meeting, Councillor MacDonald, in discussion with the Manager of Economic Development, highlighted that there will be potential for decisions to be made at future board meetings, and therefore the report before you seeks authorisation to change that role to one of decision maker. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, observations, comments? Councillor Gregg.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm just curious in 3.5 of the report what the discussions were, what the nature of them were to prompt this change.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. I'm going to bring in my colleague Mark Davidson, who was at the meeting, who will be able to take you through the detail of that.
Thank you. The decisions were around the governance and some of the financial decisions of the delivery of the Business Gateway services. So a strategic overview relating back to Scottish Government funding.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Gregg.
Thank you.
Okay, no more hands. Okay, can I move to the recommendations? There is just one. Is it agreed? Agreed. And just to say thank you from me.
Please stop the live stream, John.